My name is Evelyn Marsh. I have lived in the same house on Birchwood Lane in Guelph, Ontario, for 43 years. The walls here hold everything: the smell of cedar from the old closet in the hallway, the faint trace of my late husband's pipe tobacco that somehow never left the curtains, no matter how many times I washed them, and the particular creak of the third step on the staircase that I stopped trying to fix decades ago. It became a kind of companion, that creak, a small, reliable sound in a life that had known too much silence. That Wednesday morning in late October felt like every other Wednesday. The maples out front had gone deep orange and red, and the wind was pulling the last of them down onto the front walk. I had already made my tea black, no sugar, from the same ceramic pot my mother brought over from England when she immigrated in 1971, and I was standing at the kitchen window watching the leaves when my grandson Noah appeared in the doorway still wearing his pyjamas. He was 11 years old and had the kind of quiet, watchful eyes that made you feel he was always thinking something he wasn't quite ready to say yet. He had been staying with me since Monday because his school had a professional development week, and his mother, my daughter Sandra, was working long shifts at the hospital where she was a nurse. It was an arrangement we had fallen into easily over the years. Noah liked my house. He said it smelled like stories. "Gran," he said, leaning against the doorframe, "I don't feel right. My stomach hurts." I looked at him carefully. He was pale, and there were shadows under his eyes that I hadn't noticed the night before. I pressed the back of my hand to his forehead, out of habit more than necessity. He wasn't feverish, but he looked genuinely unwell, that particular kind of unwell children get when something has unsettled them without them knowing what it is. "Stay home," I said. "I'll call the school." He nodded and shuffled back down the hall to the living room couch, pulling a blanket over himself. I made him dry toast and a small glass of ginger ale. He fell asleep by 9:30, the television murmuring softly in the background. I want to tell you about this house before I tell you what happened that morning, because the house matters. It matters more than I can easily explain. My husband Gerald and I bought this property in 1981 when we were both 34 years old and newly arrived to Guelph from Halifax. Gerald worked in civil engineering. I taught primary school for 27 years. We saved carefully and we spent carefully, and we raised our daughter Sandra in these rooms. We hosted every Christmas, every birthday, every Easter dinner under this roof. When Gerald was diagnosed with early-onset Parkinson's at 59, I cut my hours at school to care for him. When he passed away in 2014, I sat at the kitchen table for 4 days before I was able to do much of anything again. But the house held me. The cedar smell, the creaking stair, the window that looks out over the backyard where Gerald had planted a row of white spruce trees that are now taller than the roofline. It held me the way only a place you have loved can hold a person. The house is paid for. It has been paid for since 2003. It is mine in a way that few things in this world belong to anyone. 2 years after Gerald died, Sandra married a man named Victor Calloway. He was a contractor, charming in the way that certain people are charming when they are performing charm, all ease and eye contact, and well-timed jokes. I wanted to like him because Sandra loved him, and Sandra's happiness had always been the organizing principle of my life. But there was something in Victor that I could not quite settle into trusting. He asked questions about property values at family dinners. He mentioned renovation costs and resale margins in ways that felt practiced. He treated Gerald's memory like a footnote. Still, Sandra was happy for several years. Noah was born in 2013, and Victor was attentive when it suited him. But by the time Noah was 7 or 8, I noticed Sandra coming to visit alone more often. She deflected my questions with small, rehearsed answers. I did not push. I had learned by then that Sandra needed time before she could say difficult things out loud. 14 months before the morning Noah stayed home with a stomachache, Victor came to see me alone. It was a Saturday afternoon in August. Sandra was not with him, and he did not explain why. He sat down at my kitchen table with the comfortable manner of a man who has been rehearsing something and is finally ready to deliver it. "Evelyn," he said, using my first name the way he always did, even though I had never invited him to, "I've been doing some thinking about your situation here. You're on your own, the place is bigger than you need, and property values on this street have gone up significantly. I've done some rough numbers." He slid a piece of paper across the table. It had figures on it. "Market estimates," he said, "maintenance projections, what the house would be worth if it were sold now versus in 5 years." I looked at the paper without touching it. "This house is not for sale," I said. He leaned back with the patient smile of someone who expects resistance and has already planned around it. "Nobody's talking about selling tomorrow. I'm just saying it might be worth thinking about your options. Sandra and I could find you something smaller, more manageable, somewhere without all the upkeep." "I manage the upkeep fine," I said. "Thank you for coming." He left without the paper. I put it in the recycling bin without reading the figures. He came back 3 more times over the following year. Each visit had a different angle. Once he talked about power of attorney, how it was simply responsible planning for someone my age. Another time he brought paperwork he described as a family trust arrangement that would protect the house from probate costs. The third time he brought a young man he introduced as a financial advisor, who sat at my table and used terms I didn't recognize while Victor watched my face. Each time I said I would think about it. Each time I did not sign anything. After the third visit, things shifted. Victor stopped coming alone. He stopped coming at all. Sandra visited less frequently, and when she did, she seemed distracted, apologetic in a way she could not explain. Noah still came regularly. We had our own relationship by then, he and I, built out of Saturday morning pancakes and board games and the long walks we took along the Speed River where I taught him the names of the birds. But something in the atmosphere around Sandra and Victor had changed, and I felt it the way you feel weather before it arrives. That Wednesday morning in October, Noah was asleep on my couch, and I was upstairs in the small room I use as a study, going through some correspondence, when I heard the front door. Not a knock. The door itself, the distinctive sound of my own deadbolt turning. I froze. "Only 3 people have a key to this house, Sandra, my neighbor Patricia, who keeps a spare for emergencies, and Gerald's brother Frank, who lives in Kelowna and hasn't visited in 2 years. Sandra was at the hospital. Patricia had never used her key without calling first. I stood very still at the top of the stairs. Below me, through the gap in the banister, I could see into the hallway. Victor walked in. He moved quickly and quietly, the way a person moves when they believe they are alone. He went directly to the small desk in the hallway, a narrow antique piece where I keep Gerald's old letter opener, a bowl for my keys, and a stack of loose papers and mail. Victor pulled open the top drawer. He reached inside. He took something out of his jacket pocket, a folded document of some kind, and placed it in the drawer with what was already there. Then he straightened up and took out his phone. "It's there," he said, speaking low and fast. "I put it in with the other stuff on the desk. She'll never know the difference. Give it 2 weeks, and then we start the process." A pause. "No, she won't fight it. She's old, and she's on her own. Who's she going to call?" He listened for a moment, then said, "Just make sure your contact at the office handles it properly. I don't want any delays once we move." He put the phone away. He looked around the hallway once, briefly, and then walked back out the door. The deadbolt turned again. His car started in the street and pulled away. I stood at the top of the stairs and did not move for nearly a full minute. From the living room, I heard nothing. I thought Noah was still asleep. I thought he had not heard any of it. I was wrong. I came downstairs slowly, my hand on the railing. My legs felt strange, as if the house itself had tilted slightly and I was finding my balance on a new angle. I went to the hallway desk and opened the top drawer. It looked ordinary at first. My hydro bill, a birthday card I had not yet sent, the small notebook where I keep phone numbers I might need. And there, slipped beneath the notebook so that only the edge of it showed, was a document I did not recognize. 2 pages, folded together. I pulled it out and unfolded it on the desk, and I put on my glasses. It took me a moment to understand what I was reading, because the language was formal and dense, and I am not a lawyer. But certain phrases came clear quickly. Property transfer authorization. Gerald Marsh and Evelyn Marsh, my name, my husband's name, on a document dated 5 years ago. My husband, who had been dead for 10 years. My signature at the bottom. Gerald's signature beside mine. I had never seen this document in my life. I set it down on the desk very carefully, the way you set something down when you are afraid of what you might do if you hold it a moment longer. Gran. Noah was standing in the doorway of the living room. He was not asleep. He had been there the whole time. "I heard him," he said. His voice was very quiet. "I heard everything." He was 11 years old, and he was standing there in his pajamas with his blanket still wrapped around his shoulders, and his face held an expression I had not seen on him before. Something older than 11. Something that understood, even without fully understanding, that what had just happened was serious. "How long were you awake?" I asked. "Since the door," he said. I didn't move. I looked through the doorway. I saw him go to the desk. He paused. "Gran, I took a picture." He held up his phone. He had photographed Victor at the desk from the living room doorway. The image was slightly blurry at the edges, but clear enough. Victor's back, his hand in the open drawer, the hallway clock visible in the background showing 10 minutes past 11. I sat down on the chair beside the desk because my legs had finished cooperating. "You took a picture," I said, "and I recorded the phone call." He showed me the screen, his voice memo app, still running. He had pressed record before Victor had even finished his first sentence. I looked at my grandson for a long moment. He had pulled the blanket tighter around himself, and he was watching me with those quiet, watchful eyes, waiting to see how I would respond to what he had done. "Come sit down," I said, "and tell me every single thing." We sat at the kitchen table for a long time. Noah walked me through it step by step, the sound of the key, his decision to stay very still and not make noise, reaching for his phone on the side table by the couch, pressing record before he fully understood why he was doing it. He had understood, he said, that whatever was happening was something he shouldn't interrupt, something that needed to be witnessed rather than stopped. I asked him if he was frightened. He thought about this seriously, the way he thought about most things. "A little," he said. "But I was more worried about you." I read through the document again at the kitchen table with Noah beside me. The signatures were not obviously fake. Whoever had done this had been careful. My name looked something like my name. Gerald's looked something like Gerald's. But Gerald had been dead since 2014, and this document was dated 2019, and I had never signed anything like this. I knew my own signature, and I knew what I had and had not agreed to, and this was not something I had ever agreed to. I called Sandra. She answered on her break, speaking quietly the way she does when she's at the hospital and doesn't want to be overheard. I told her, in plain and simple sentences, what had happened. I told her about Victor coming in with the key, about the document, about the signatures, about Noah's photograph and the recording. The silence on her end of the line lasted long enough that I checked to make sure the call had not dropped. "Mom," she finally said. Her voice had changed completely. Whatever she had been managing or suppressing or looking away from for the past year came through in that single word. "Mom, I need to come over." "Finish your shift," I said. "Noah and I are fine. But Sandra, I need you to hear me. This is serious. Do you understand what I'm telling you?" "Yes," she said. "I understand." Another pause. "Mom, I'm sorry. I didn't know it had gone this far. I swear to you I didn't know." I believed her. Not because I wanted to, though I did want to. I believed her because I knew my daughter, and the sound in her voice was not the sound of someone performing innocence. It was the sound of someone whose worst fear had just been confirmed. We hung up. I looked at Noah, who had been sitting quietly through the whole conversation, finishing his ginger ale. "What do we do now?" he asked. "Now," I said, "we make copies of everything." I photographed the document with my own phone. Noah sent me the recording and his photograph by text. I emailed all 3 files to myself, then forwarded them to my personal email account on the computer upstairs, then saved them to the small external hard drive Gerald had kept for backing up his project files and that I had never thrown away. Then I sat down and wrote out, by hand, in the notebook where I keep important phone numbers, a full account of what had happened, times, words, the position of the document in the drawer, the exact phrases Victor had used on the phone. I noted the time I wrote each thing, 11:47 inches the morning. Noah watched all of this with patient attention. "You're making evidence," he said. I'm making evidence, I confirmed. That afternoon, I called my lawyer. Her name is Christine Adeyemi, and I have used her for 30 years, since she was a junior associate at the firm that handled the original purchase of this house. She has updated my will twice, handled Gerald's estate, and reviewed the lease on my car 3 years ago when I was not sure about the terms. She picked up on the second ring. I told her everything. She listened without interrupting, which is one of the things I have always respected about her. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. "Evelyn," she said, "don't touch the document again. Put it in a plastic bag or an envelope. Don't fold it differently than it already is. I'm going to refer you to a colleague who handles fraud and estate law. His name is Raymond Choi, and he's excellent. I'll call him today and have him contact you. In the meantime, I want you to write down everything you just told me and sign and date it. Do you have someone who can witness your signature?" I looked at Noah. "My grandson is here," I said. "He's 11. He can witness it," Christine said. "A witness just needs to watch you sign. Age doesn't disqualify him." "Christine," I said, "the document has Gerald's signature on it. Gerald has been gone since 2014. Another silence. "Then whoever did this made a significant error," she said, "because that is verifiable. We have his death certificate. We have probate records. A document signed by a dead man in 2019 is not going to hold up to any scrutiny at all." I felt something release in my chest, not relief exactly, but the first easing of the tightness that had been sitting there since I heard that deadbolt turn. "What do I do about the key?" I said. "Change the locks today," Christine said. "This afternoon. Call a locksmith." I called a locksmith. He came at 3 o'clock and replaced both the front and back deadbolts. I had him do the side entrance to the garage as well. I did not contact Victor. I did not respond to a text message he sent Sandra that evening asking if Noah could be dropped off Thursday morning instead of Friday. Sandra, who was sitting at my kitchen table by then, read it and set her phone face down without replying. She had come directly from the hospital, still in her scrubs. She had listened to the recording at my kitchen table with her hands flat on the surface and her face very still. When it ended, she did not say anything for a long time. Noah had gone upstairs to the small bedroom he always uses when he stays with me, giving us privacy without being asked. "How long have you known something was wrong?" I asked her. I did not say it with anger. I genuinely wanted to understand. She pressed her lips together. "I knew he was under financial pressure. I knew there were debts I didn't have the full picture of. He kept things separate, his business accounts, certain payments. I found some things a few months ago and I asked him about them and he explained them away." She looked at the table. I wanted to believe the explanations. Noah is his son, and I wanted to believe it. "I know," I said. "I should have warned you," she said. "Mom, I should have come to you." "You're here now," I said. Raymond Choi contacted me the next morning. He was brisk and precise and used plain language, which I appreciated. He said the document appeared to have several significant problems beyond the impossible signature. The notarization stamp was from a commissioner who, preliminary searches suggested, did not have an active license in Ontario at the time shown on the document. The language in the transfer clause was inconsistent with standard Ontario property law as it existed in 2019. And the supposed property assessment number cited in the document did not match the actual assessment number on file for this address. "Whoever prepared this," Raymond said, "was either not a lawyer or was careless enough to make fundamental errors. Neither is good for them." The Royal Canadian Mounted Police Detachment in Guelph was contacted that same day. Detective Constable Priya Mehta was assigned to the case. She was a composed, methodical woman in her mid-40s who came to the house with a colleague the following afternoon. She collected the original document in an evidence bag. She took copies of Noah's photograph and the audio recording. She noted the metadata on Noah's phone, the timestamp showing the recording had begun before Victor's call ended. "The metadata is useful," she told me. "It's harder to argue with than memory." She asked me to walk her through the timeline in detail when Victor had first mentioned power of attorney, the 3 visits with paperwork, the months of pressure. I had written all of it out the day before, and I gave her the written account with my signature and Noah's witness signature at the bottom. She asked if Noah would be able to speak with her. I said I would check with Sandra. Sandra said yes. Noah sat at the kitchen table across from Detective Constable Mehta and described what he had seen and heard with the same quiet precision he had used with me. He did not exaggerate and he did not minimize. He said exactly what he had observed, in the order he had observed it. When it was over, Mehta looked at him for a moment. "You thought to record it before you understood why," she said. "That's good instinct." Noah considered this. "Gran always says if something doesn't feel right, pay attention to it," he said. "I didn't feel right about the key." Mehta glanced at me. I looked at the table and felt something move through me that was too complicated to name. The investigation that followed took several weeks. What emerged was this: Victor, facing serious business debts accumulated through a failed development project in Kitchener. He had worked with a man named Dale Pruitt, a disbarred paralegal he had met through a mutual contact, to create fraudulent property transfer documentation for 3 properties. Mine was one of them. The plan, as best as investigators could reconstruct it, was to use the documents to initiate transfer proceedings through a back-channel contact at a small title company, moving quickly enough that the error might not surface until the transfer was substantially complete. The use of Gerald's name had been a miscalculation. Pruitt had apparently not verified the death records thoroughly and had assumed an elderly couple's documentation would be less carefully scrutinized. Victor was arrested on a Tuesday morning in November. I know this because Mehta called me before 7 in the morning to let me know. I was already awake, sitting with my tea at the kitchen window watching the first snow of the season come down over the white spruce trees Gerald had planted. Dale Pruitt was arrested the same day. The charges included fraud over $5,000, identity fraud, and forgery. The Crown also pursued elder abuse provisions under the criminal code, given that the victim of the primary scheme was a 73-year-old woman living alone. Raymond Choi told me this was significant, that prosecutors had treated it seriously rather than as a peripheral concern. Sandra filed for divorce 2 weeks after Victor's arrest. She told me it was a decision she had been building toward for longer than she had admitted to herself, and that what had happened had simply removed the last thing she had been holding on to, the possibility that she had been wrong about what she suspected. She and Noah moved into a rental apartment on the east side of Guelph in December. They came to my house every Sunday for dinner, and Noah spent several weekends in his usual room at the top of the stairs. The court process took most of the following year. I will not dwell on it at length because courts take time and repetition and a great deal of sitting in rooms waiting for things to happen. What I will tell you is this: Victor pleaded guilty in September to reduced charges after extended negotiations. He received 18 months of house arrest and a substantial fine, with conditions including a prohibition from holding power of attorney over any person for a period of 10 years. Dale Pruitt, who had prior convictions, received a custodial sentence of 22 months. I sat in the courtroom on the day the plea was entered. Sandra sat beside me. Noah was in school. When the sentence was read out, I did not cheer and I did not cry. I simply sat there and breathed, and I thought about Gerald's signature on that forged document, and I felt something that was not quite anger and not quite peace, but somewhere in the territory between them where most of real life tends to happen. Outside the courthouse, Sandra took my hand as we walked to the car. The November air was sharp and the leaves had all come down, and the sky over downtown Guelph was the specific pale gray of a Canadian fall afternoon. "I'm sorry, Mom," she said. "Not for the first time. Not, I suspected, for the last." "I know," I said. "So am I." We drove home. In January, I updated my will with Christine Adeyemi. The house on Birchwood Lane, upon my death, goes to Noah directly, not through any intermediary, not held in any trust with a third-party administrator, but to him outright when he turns 25, with Sandra as trustee in the interim. Copies are held by Christine's office, by the firm's secure digital archive, and by my neighbor, Patricia, who has known me for 31 years and will outlive most institutions. I also changed the way I handle my important documents. Everything significant is now kept in a fireproof lockbox in my bedroom closet. My lawyer has a duplicate key. I do not keep anything in the hallway desk except mail I have already read. Noah turned 12 in February. For his birthday, he asked for a proper bird identification guide and a pair of binoculars because we had started keeping a list of every bird we spotted on our walks along the Speed River, and he wanted to be more systematic about it. I gave him both. On a cold Saturday morning in late February, we walked the river trail for 2 hours and added a red-breasted nuthatch to our list, which Noah recorded in the small notebook he now carries specifically for this purpose, noting the date, the time, and the weather conditions. He does not talk often about what happened. He is 11-12 now, and he understands it in the way that children understand serious things, completely in some ways, not at all in others. Once, on one of those walks, he asked me if I was angry. Sometimes, I said. At my dad? Yes. And at the situation. He was quiet for a moment. A chickadee landed in the cedar hedge beside the path, and we both stopped to look at it. I'm glad I stayed home that day, he said. So am I said. More than I can tell you. He recorded the chickadee in his notebook, and we kept walking. I want to say something to you before I finish, because if you are listening to this story, there is probably a reason. Maybe you have an older parent living alone, and you have not called this week. Maybe you are that older person and something in your own life has been nagging at you, a signature someone is pressuring you toward, a conversation that felt off, a document you were told not to worry about reading carefully. Maybe you are somewhere in the middle, watching a family situation that seems small and manageable slowly become something else. Please hear this. Trust the feeling that tells you something is not right. That feeling is not weakness, and it is not paranoia. It is your accumulated experience trying to protect you, and it is usually correct. If someone is pressuring you to sign a legal document, any legal document, regardless of the relationship, stop. Ask for time. Do not apologize for asking. Your right to understand what you are signing does not expire when you turn 60 or 70 or 80. A legitimate person will wait. Only someone who needs you not to read carefully will make you feel rushed. Keep records. Write down dates and what was said. This takes 5 minutes, and it has saved people from situations far worse than mine. Know your own documents. Know what you own and what is in your name and what is in your safe or your lawyer's office. Elder fraud in Canada affects thousands of people every year, and the majority of cases involve someone the victim trusted, a family member, a family friend, someone with access. Proximity and trust are not protection. Change your locks if someone has a key they should not have. This is not unfriendly. This is your home. And if you are an older person living alone, please tell someone, a neighbor, a friend, a family member outside the immediate household, the basic shape of your legal and financial situation. Not the details necessarily. Just enough so that if something seems wrong, someone else will know what right is supposed to look like. Noah was 12 years old, and he pressed record on a phone before he fully knew why. He did it because something did not feel right. He did it because I had spent 11 years walking with him along rivers and teaching him the names of birds and telling him that paying attention is one of the most important things a person can do. You do not need to be 12 to pay attention. You do not need anyone to tell you what you already feel. The house on Birchwood Lane still smells like cedar and old curtains. The third step still creaks. The white spruce trees are taller than ever, and in the early mornings when the light comes in sideways through the kitchen window, I still think of Gerald. I make my tea in the pot my mother brought from England. I water my plants. I listen to the wall clock tick through another season. This is my life and it belongs to me. No forged signature will ever change that. If this story reached something in you, I hope you will share it with someone who needs to hear it. And I would love to know in the comments, tell me, what is one thing you do to protect yourself or someone you love? Your answer might be exactly what someone else has been waiting to read.